In this lesson, we're going to talk about the top 10 foods that worsen your diabetes and actually even raise even more your blood sugar levels, okay? And the first type of food that comes to mind are grains, okay? Unfortunately, grains are absolutely everywhere. They're in most processed foods. They're even in so-called health stores. They're touted as a health food many times. Unfortunately, this is not the case for diabetics. For diabetics and for people with high blood sugar levels, grains are some of the worst foods they could eat. Not only they skyrocket blood sugar levels, but they also inhibit a normal digestion because they contain many anti-nutrients. One of them, protein that's called gluten. You might have heard of it. This gluten is an indigestible protein by most people. Like more than 80% of people cannot digest this protein, which only leads to impaired digestion and harming your digestive flora and your digestive lining. Okay. Foods that contain grains can include breads, all kind of pastries, all kind of cookies, anything that contains flour, any kind of flour, okay? Any kind of from wheat to corn to even the healthy, so-called healthy grains like amaranth and millet and many more, okay? Do yourself a favor and avoid grains as much as possible. It will not only drastically improve your diabetes, they will also improve your health overall if you avoid eating them. The next food that worsen your diabetes is, as you probably might guess, sweets. Now, there's not necessarily a problem with sweets, like normal people can eat them from time to time. However, especially in modern times, sweets contain a truckload of sugar and a truckload of other artificial sweeteners, not to mention grains, not to mention artificial additives, and so on. Basically, this makes sweets a very poisonous food, okay? That's the real problem with sweets. Obviously, there's another problem that because of your impaired insulin sensitivity, you cannot process and manage the blood sugar as well as a healthy person. But that's kind of secondary compared to the disastrous health effects they have overall on any person's health, okay? So make yourself a favor and avoid sweets as much as possible. Vegetable oils. These are some of the worst foods you can consume ever. Okay, we talked about them briefly earlier on. Vegetable oils include canola oil, include corn oil, soy oil, and many others. Basically, what the oils that I recommend are just olive oil, coconut oil, and cocoa oil. That's it. Please avoid any other oils whatsoever. Okay, these vegetable oils not only have a destructive effect on your metabolism, but they also impair your digestion as well, which leads even more to an impaired blood sugar management. Starches. Normally, in a normal context, starches would be pretty healthy for a normal person, presumingly that they would move frequently on a day-to-day basis, and they would be healthy overall and so on. However, as a diabetic, you cannot manage to control the blood sugar spike that comes from eating starches. The healthiest starches would be rice and potatoes, especially sweet potatoes. You can eat them after you go through the 30-day program that I suggest at the end of this course, and after you achieve normal blood sugar levels. Afterwards, you can eat small quantities of them, maybe even increasing them over time, if you also include a large salad with vinegar, ginger, and other spices to tone down the blood sugar spike. However, for the time being, make sure that you avoid starches as much as possible. Starches such as corn, such as potatoes, such as rice, and so on. Fruits are touted as a health food. They generally speaking are, however, in spite of the fact that in modern times fruits are not that healthy as they once were, because they're now injected with sugar and artificial sweeteners to make them more palatable and kind of increase the addiction towards them. However, as a diabetic, you cannot afford to eat fruit, even worse, fruit jams or fruit juices and so on, because they include an obscene amount of sugar that your blood sugar management cannot handle. The only fruit I would recommend that you could eat in small quantities, like just a handful, would be berries, because berries are the fruit that contain the most antioxidants and nutrients per pound than any other fruit. So if you must eat some fruit, I should emphasize that not fruit jams and not fruit juices, okay? Just the fruit, just the berries. If you really want to eat some fruit, eat a handful of berries, okay? Blackberries, blueberries, cranberries, anything that ends with berries is really good for you, as long as you keep it down, at least initially, until you reach normal blood sugar levels. Canned soups. These so-called foods contain incredible amount of artificial substances that will just destroy your metabolism and your digestive flora. Make yourself a favor, avoid them at all costs, even if they seem very healthy or they have a low quantity of carbohydrates and so on, because they generally speaking they get included in the processed foods category. As I was mentioning, any processed food whatsoever you should avoid at all costs. And when I mean processed food, I mean any food that's in a box, in a bottle, in a wrapped in plastic, anything like that. You should avoid all foods that are like this. Some exceptions would be like nuts and seeds that are just deposited in maybe plastic bags. But beyond that, make sure you avoid any processed foods whatsoever. Legumes are usually considered as being healthy. This includes beans, lentils, quinoa, and so on. However, they contain a pretty high amount of carbohydrates, which you as a diabetic cannot afford to eat, because they would drastically raise your blood sugar levels. However, that wouldn't be necessarily a problem on the long term, but they usually require a thorough cooking and preparation so that the anti-nutrients in them get eliminated, so that you keep only the nutrients. In my humble opinion, it's not worth it, because they're not that nutritious, okay? And even if they are, it's not worthwhile your time and effort to eat them now in the period of 30 days that you need to restore your normal blood sugar levels, okay? So my suggestion is just forget about them and focus instead on other natural healthy foods. Conventional dairy is another food category that I strongly advise you to avoid. This is simply because conventional dairy, the ones that you see in supermarkets and health stores and so on, they're usually pasteurized, which eliminates all the beneficial bacteria and microorganisms from dairy. Beyond this, they also put a lot of sugar and artificial sweeteners to make it sweeter and more palatable, and to make the consumers come again and again after them, okay? The problem is that beyond the high quantity of carbohydrates, sugar, and other artificial sweeteners, conventional dairy usually isn't well tolerated by most people's digestive tracts. That's why I usually suggest people to avoid dairy that comes from cows and instead focus on goat products, okay, that you can purchase from local farmers that truly take care of their goats. They let them roam free in nature. They really take good care of them. They don't raise them on on a terrible farm that just abuses them and so on. Okay, so make sure that if you truly want to consume dairy, first consume only goat products, and second, get them only from a trusted local source. Otherwise, avoid any other conventional dairy whatsoever. The last food category is a pretty funny one and includes alcohol and sodas. Now, alcohol is a very interesting substance because when it comes to blood sugar levels, it depends on the quantity of it to measure its effect on blood sugar levels. For example, if you drink just a bit of it, your blood sugar levels will go up slightly, okay? After you drink some more, because of its depressive characteristics on the central nervous system and on the metabolism, your blood sugar will lower itself very much. However, there's a catch. When your blood sugar levels go so low that they come close to having a hypoglycemia crisis, you get this trigger that you should eat anything that you can get your hands on. Okay, so this triggers a lot of cravings, and obviously you'll just go for the unhealthiest foods possible that are full of carbohydrates, artificial substances, and so on. That's why I always recommend to stay away from alcohol as much as possible. Now, let's be honest, we're not monks, and maybe you like to drink from time to time at social occasions and so on. The best source of alcohol that I can recommend are wines, especially red wine, and the hard liquors. These are the healthiest ones possible. Make sure you avoid drinking more than 1 or 2 glasses per night. Okay, sodas are generally speaking terrible for your health, absolutely terrible, because they're mainly the basic culprit for this diabetes epidemic that we're experiencing in our day-to-day life, because they contain a truckload of sugar, artificial sweeteners, and so on. Just avoid them at all costs. When it comes to drinks, just drink water, maybe some unsweetened coconut water if you find it, tea, unsweetened tea, and that's it. Avoid alcohol and sodas as much as possible.